All right, thank you for joining me again on Freelancer School. My name is Mike Volkin, and today we have Trevor Twining joining us. He's freelanced for almost 2 decades, and he coaches freelancers to build profitable practices, particularly improving their sales skills. Now, Trevor hosts Freelance Foundations, where I found him from, which is a podcast that helps freelancers with both tactical and strategic issues. And his own freelance practice focuses on podcast editing. And hopefully he's going to give me some tips later on about improving my microphone technique, because I know I have issues there, and his is really awesome if you could see it, if you're watching this on YouTube. He lives in Canada's Niagara, I'm sorry, how do you say it? Niagara region?
Niagara region, so right beside Niagara
Where is
Falls.
that in Canada? Is that northern Canada?
No, it is, we're 40 minutes from Buffalo, New York.
Okay, well, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. This is, it's great to be on.
Now, thank you. I had found you on your podcast. Obviously, it's pretty popular. And then I started looking more into you, and then I found your blog. Love your blog. I'm a subscriber. And I have to ask you, in your blog that's titled The 3 Essential Freelancer Tactics for Getting Paid, you talk about the importance of getting at least 50% deposit before starting work, which is something I highly encourage our students to do at Freelancer Masterclass. So can you explain how you ask for the 50%? Because a lot of people feel uncomfortable about that. And then why 50%? Why not 25? Why not 75? So where's that 50% come from?
Oh, goodness. How much time do you have?
Let's keep this under 10 minutes.
Absolutely. Okay. So, so the reason 50% is so important is because, like, long story short, again, I have a coaching practice where I help freelancers as well. And I know that in your class, this is one of the things that that you cover for sure. But long story short is that 50% number really sort of locks in the client, makes them committed to working with you. 50% of of an overall project cost is too big to just walk away from or ghost on the one side, and it makes them essentially dedicate and focus the resources that you're going to need as a freelancer internally on their side to make sure that you have all the things that you need to succeed. And while it doesn't guarantee it, it certainly helps make it more likely because they've actually got a bunch of money on the line.
Okay. And does that go for all size projects, whether it's a $200 project or a $10,000 project, still 50%?
So I would say that the larger ones, it's definitely a minimum of 50%. The smaller ones, like somebody could walk away from 50% of a $200 deal, right? So it's in some cases you might even say, you know what, if you really want me to lock in the time to do this, you can pay in advance, and I've done that before, and it's been no problem. Actually, most of my podcasting clients currently pay in advance for a block of work, and then I deliver that work incrementally as we go. So they're essentially
and you just
paying
feed
up
off
front.
that block. Yeah, that's smart. Okay, so what happens if a client comes to you and says, you know what, I pay my employees after they do work, at the end of the month. Why do I have to pay you in advance? Is there a good answer for that?
Oh, it's part of it is you also pay your employees whether or not they're doing anything productive. You also you also pay all the overhead associated with your
And
employee.
benefits. Yep.
Exactly. And as a freelancer, I take care of all that stuff myself. You don't
Yes.
pay, you as the client don't pay for a lick of that. Well, actually you pay for your very specific portion of that as it relates to the billable time that our relationship covers.
Good answer. I like that. So what are some of the warning signs that a freelancer isn't charging enough for their service?
Oh my gosh. So I'm gonna answer this question, but then also lead into what the most common underlying problem of this symptom is. So the symptom is, you're not necessarily earning enough in your practice. You feel like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul and all that sort of thing. And people are like, well, am I charging enough? And one of the ways to tell whether or not you're charging enough is if you are, you need to figure out a couple of things. You need to figure out first your basically what you want to earn as a freelancer after all your expenses are taken care of.
Yeah.
You need to figure out what the number that represents those expenses are, and then you need to figure out the level of activity that you need to generate in order to support that income. And so, if you are performing the work to generate that level of activity, and you still don't have enough to do things like pay for equipment or replace equipment, cover ongoing training expenses because we always need to keep our skills updated, pay bills on a regular basis, and put money away for retirement savings, those sorts of things. If you don't have the funds to do that, but you're doing enough work, like you feel like you're constantly busy, actually doing billable stuff, then you're probably not charging enough. But what actually happens is most people who think that they're not charging enough are actually not generating enough activity to get to the level of income that they
Correct.
want.
They're way too inefficient. Yeah.
Exactly. And that could be because they're not spending enough time selling. That could be because how they close deals is off or inefficient or that sort of thing. And so when I'm working with a client, we start to dig into like another freelancer in my coaching, we start to dig into what all of those things look like. And as you start to uncover what each of those numbers are and what they represent and how they work in your practice, you end up in this situation where you have all the levers that you can pull. I was actually doing the motion a little too low, right?
We saw it.
You've got all these little levers here that you can pull and control to actually get the kind of practice and the kind of income from your practice that you're looking for.
Very good. So you're suggesting that they don't check Instagram 20 times a day? Is that what you're suggesting?
Unless their business is posting stuff on Instagram, then I wouldn't recommend it at all.
What you're suggesting is that freelancers plan in advance their expenses and all that stuff. That's one of the things that freelancers don't do. They just shoot from the hip, the vast majority of them. And I think that's why you and I exist, is to help these freelancers understand that they got to treat their business like a business, right?
It's true, and a lot of freelancers, they get into this. I mean, my story is many moons ago. I was like many other freelancers. I was let go from a job, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I thought, well, maybe I'll hang my shingle out. And when I first started, I struggled in many of the same ways that a lot of freelancers do, where it's like, I don't know where the next check is coming from and all that sort of thing. And what I found was that the more that I paid diligent attention to it and built the discipline to treat it as an actual business, which is why I call it a freelance practice, in the same way as an architect or a doctor or a lawyer has a practice. As freelancers, we have practices where the focus of the business is to serve our clients. And so a freelance practice, when you have that level of rigor and discipline, it really becomes a bunch of habits where once you develop the muscle memory, a lot of the effort actually can go into maintaining and growing and focusing on the kind of work that you want to do as a freelancer. And So
what do you block off like a certain afternoon on your calendar every week or month to plan in advance? Do you have a process for that, or how does that work?
Yeah, so basically every Friday for me is spent doing that. So
Me too.
I have because Friday it's difficult to schedule client meetings usually.
Yes.
Who wants to be the guy or woman who's scheduling a business meeting on Friday afternoon?
That jerk. Yes.
Yeah, who wants to be that person? So so I use that time I reflect on the week that I had. I compare where I'm at within that month or quarter to what my goals had been. And I decide, am I going to change anything? Am I, what am I doing differently? What am I doing the same? It's kind of, if you were to sort of, I have 3 buckets where it's like start doing, keep doing, and stop doing. Right. And so that's the general approach that I take with it. From there, it's really that weekly increment keeps me keeps me on track. Doing it either month end. I actually do it more quarterly. It helps me keep on track with the year over year goals. And then because I've done the work in that discipline of sort of keeping everything on track as I go, if new opportunities emerge, or if emergencies come up, or that sort of thing, I've already got my baseline, and so I'm much more able to react, whether it's deal with an emergency or take advantage of an opportunity.
Yep.
Whereas if you shoot by the hip, sometimes you have to let those things go because you don't have the bandwidth to deal with them at that moment. And so
yeah, and you know what's great with that too is it keeps stress and anxiety down. A lot of times freelancers, they have a lot of stress and anxiety about, like, where's my next paycheck coming from? Like, if you already have your goals and you've reached your baseline, then you know you have a little bit of playroom there. And one of the two most hated words in the corporate world are working lunch. But I'll tell you, like, every Friday I have a working lunch with myself that I schedule twice as long as a normal lunch in my calendar. And that's really just for, like what you said, like looking ahead, looking back, and then seeing what went wrong. And am I at my goals? Do I need to double down next week on something? So just taking a working lunch and reflecting on that just gets rid of so much stress and anxiety, and helps set your whole practice, as you say, to where it should be. So
here's what I do. So I actually don't do anything at lunch other than sometimes I'll read, sometimes I do something leisure oriented at lunch. I use it a lot for going on walks because most of the time I'm sitting behind a computer, right? So, but what I do on Fridays is I will go for a pint with some of my friends. I go for a beer, but I'll go an hour before, and I'll sit and I'll have a much smaller pint, and I'll work on this plan. And we've sort of wrapped all of this into what me and a bunch of other freelancers call our Fuck It Friday. And if you need to bleep it out, it's fine. People will get what it is.
I have a grown-up audience. They know.
Yeah, but this becomes a ritual where we share our successes, we celebrate failures, that sort of thing. And with other freelancers, it sort of gives you the support, the social support, to continue on your plan.
Right. Very good. And you said smaller pint, but I think you meant larger pint, right? Is that right?
It depends on how the plan works out.
I don't know you that well. I just want to guess, are you a lager guy or an amber ale? I think you're one of those two. Is that?
So I'm more of an IPA guy, or I'm a big fan of porters.
Okay.
And so, an occasional stout. There's a microbrew that is that's minutes from my house that gets a lot.
That's dangerous.
So,
oh man, well, I don't know if they have these in Canada yet, but I'm a big sour beer guy. Do you have sour beers?
I do, and I've had a lot of them this summer, and I'm kind of tired of them. I'm actually looking forward to a lot of the darker, sort of stronger, warmer beers that winter usually brings. So.
Nothing wrong with that. Just can't do that in the middle of the day. I don't know if it's my age or what, but I'll just want to take a nap afterwards.
I hear you.
Before like noon or 2 o'clock. So tell me a little bit about what are you doing now that fills your time?
So I basically edit podcasts, and I have I switched practices a few years ago. I was a full-time web developer, and now I am shifting into podcast development, and that's going well. And I actually haven't been doing a lot of work with Freelance Foundations, the podcast, in the last little bit, because we're giving that a break. But season 7 will be starting up very soon. I have 13 episodes in production right now, and that's the full season is probably going to be double that. So, but yeah, that starts October 1.
Okay, Freelance Foundation. Give me the mission. What's the mission for that?
Freelance Foundations is the podcast for the independent workforce. And so I basically talk about freelancing and freelance-related issues with sometimes with guests, but a lot of times I'll just pick a topic and I'll riff on it. And I'll share stories about, how things happen to me, and how things have happened in other freelancers' practices where I've helped coach them, or for a number of years I ran a co-working space, and so I worked with a lot of freelancers through that. And so it's just sharing the things that I learned about freelancing in order to help people build profitable freelance practices.
Very cool. How can our audience follow you online and all your
Oh,
advice?
geez. Anywhere anywhere online, basically at Trevor Twining, Twining.
Okay.
And I'm fairly active on Twitter. I do a lot more reading than posting on Instagram, but I used to and will start again shortly. I used to do a weekly post on Instagram called Monday Morning Hustle, where it was like a very quick sort of set of tips. If you needed something, if you needed a way to sort of focus your freelance practice in some way and you needed like an idea, this was like a steady source of ideas that you could just sort of draw from. And I did it every Monday morning, and I kind of got out of the habit, but I've had a couple people reach out to me and say, is that coming back at any point? Yeah. So,
Cool.
so for me, that's a really good social signal that that content was valuable. So I'm
Nice.
going to invest some more time in doing
I'll
that.
have to follow you on Instagram. I'm like you, but on Twitter, I read a lot, but I don't post a lot. So I will find you on Twitter as well. And I'll put all the links to all your social accounts and your website on our show notes and on our YouTube video and stuff. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope to have you on. You sound like a resource that we could talk to about a variety of topics. So I'd like to absolutely keep in touch with you. And
Anytime, Mike.
All right. Thanks again. Bye.
Thanks for having me.